Okay, here we go. Cool, cool. Now, so I think we should be good. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so we should be good. Once we start so I'll stop sharing the screen when we go to the Q&A section.
Okay. Yeah.
Or should I keep the Q&A slide up, but then you would have to be the one to read all of the questions?
I'm nervous about my internet connection just in case, just like worst case scenario. Yeah, I think if we just X out, that could work.
Okay. So then I'd have to share the screen again to go to our
okay.
Our last slide.
You know what? Why don't we try I read them, and then if it doesn't work, we have a plan B.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool. Now we're just waiting for people to come to our live stream.
Come to our live stream.
Come to our live stream. We are here. There is a delay, so.
Yes. Yeah.
So Erin, how are you this lovely afternoon?
I'm very good. How are you?
Good.
I'm glad that you have Chip with you.
I do have Chip with me.
I have a garden gnome.
Oh, lovely. Lovely. Oh, hello, Paris. Welcome.
Hi, welcome.
We are going to give it just a couple of minutes to make sure everyone has a chance to come join us before we officially start. So we are, just to let anyone who's in here right now, just to let you know, we will do a live Q&A at the end. So if you have questions for us, thank you. If you have questions for us, or if you have any comments, or you need to, just give us a piece of your mind, go ahead and put that into the chat. And we're going to try to keep track of any questions that are coming in, and then we'll try to answer those at the end, or address any concern.
Address the concern.
Address the concerns. But yeah, so if you are asking us a question and we're not responding, that's why. We're not just ignoring you. We'll answer you toward the end.
Welcome everyone.
Yeah, welcome everyone. Oh, hi Rachel. What am I hearing? I think I'm hearing background noise.
Oh,
that's okay. That'll be fine. Little background noise never hurt anyone. All right, let's give it another 2 minutes, because I know some people might have had it might take a little bit of time to find the right channel, but then we'll get started. But while we're waiting to get started, should we ask everyone a question?
Yeah.
What should we ask? What is your favorite what's your favorite color of pen to write with?
Love it.
So, well, what's your favorite, Erin?
I like either the most ridiculous of the bright pinks.
Okay, valid.
Actually, there is no second part to that. I like a ridiculous bright pink.
Yeah.
And yourself?
Do you dot your eyes with hearts?
I don't. I'm a fan of a butt, but I don't.
You're a fan of a butt?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are you Tina Belcher?
What is a heart but a butt?
That's
already brought us down. And what about yourself, Rhonda? What do you like to write with?
I like to write with like a quill pen and a little pot of ink,
Of course.
specifically on like a piece of fine vellum parchment. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay. So we've got Jane Austen first drafts says blue. Paris says, love sparkly gel pens, need more. Pink is always a winner for sure. We've got another one for pink.
I love a sparkly gel pen. That reminds me of like
gel pen.
Like book fair in 3rd grade. They don't have all the gel pen. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And then you'd sign each other's yearbooks with different colors of gel pens.
And then your gel pens would match your jelly shoes.
Oh, yes.
I mean,
we're getting into it. Oh, we've got always have black ink. Okay. Yep. Pink and purple. Love it. Love it. All right. Well, I think, you know what, it says we've got 9 watching now. I think that's probably that's a good number. So we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, I'm Rhonda.
Hi, I'm Erin.
And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see our lovely slides. And we will start the show. Okay. There we go. So we are the hosts of a podcast called Pop DNA that breaks down and traces the literary and historical and cultural influences in works of modern pop culture media. But we're doing that a little bit. We're switching that up today.
Yeah. So we've been doing our podcast for a while now, and what usually our process is we would start with a modern popular work and trace its influences, but today we're doing the opposite. We started by analyzing comedic elements within Jane Austen and then located them in modern work.
Yeah, and so just right up at the top here, I made a funny little graphic. This is something I like to do. So this is if Jane Austen were a TV writer, because she 100% would be a TV comedy showrunner if she were alive right now, right? So, but we wanted to just acknowledge at the top that WGA and SAG-AFTRA are both on strike, and that's relevant to our talk today because we are going to be discussing a few TV shows that are produced by companies that WGA and SAG are currently striking. So just wanted to make that clear up here at the top.
And we had decided to talk about these works before these strikes had occurred, even the WGA strike. But we do really want to emphasize here that we 100% support the strikers and all workers who are currently fighting for their equitable treatment and fair wages in all industries, especially the ones that give us so much that we love.
Yes. And I think Jane Austen would too, or at least I hope so. I hope she would support workers' rights. This is supposed to be funny. We are going to have fun, I promise.
But we did just want to make it clear as
well. Yeah. But to kind of start off this conversation about comedy, so I just loved this quote from Ted Scheinman that says, on screen, Austen can feel so starchily familiar that one almost forgets her comic and brutal fixation on what lies beneath the starch. And I think that's so true. I think that, we often get swept up in like the romance in Jane Austen stories. And I think that, buying into the romance is absolutely in line with what Jane Austen intends for her works to do, but they're also very funny. And that's what we really wanted to highlight today. So
for our time together, we're looking at the different expressions of comedy. And not all of these are necessarily elements of comedy, but they are all different expressions of comedy, which we have observed in the works of Jane Austen. And we took an individual work of Jane Austen, and then we would match it with a popular television show, which would hold similar elements.
And so the first one that we're just going to lay kind of a baseline here is A Comedy of Manners. And I feel like as Jane Austen fans, most of us probably have at least somewhat of an understanding of what comedy of manners is. But just to give us a little, the Encyclopedia Britannica coming through, coming in clutch here. So we so we have in comedy of manners, typically it is concerned with social usage and whether or not characters meet like a set social standard. And the social standards highlighted in comedy of manners is usually like morally trivial, like it's something that really doesn't matter, but it's very important to the society that this comedy is portraying. So, very in line with what Jane Austen, with the comedy that she, wrote in her works. And then just a really quick history of, eras and societies where we see comedies of manners. We have ancient Greece. We have the Italian Renaissance with the Commedia dell'arte, of course, Shakespeare and other Renaissance dramatists, and then into the late 19th, early 20th century English drama. So you've got your Oscar Wilde, you've got your Noel Coward, you've got your George Bernard Shaw, and all three of whom, were influenced by Jane Austen. So she's definitely like a link in this chain of comedy of manners. And for our contemporary comedies of manners, these are just a few examples. I just pulled, these are from like the top 10 most popular, at least at the time that I pulled them, that are tagged with comedy of manners on IMDb. So this gives you kind of an idea of what a modern comedy of manners might look like. And so, this is just kind of like the basic, a baseline understanding of comedy of manners before we get into like kind of our deep dive into the different elements. The first of which is going to be parody. So of course, Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey is very famously known as a parody of the 18th century Gothic novel. And we thought, what better modern work to pair with Northanger Abbey than The Woman in the House Across the Street from the Girl in the Window, the Netflix series. So for Northanger Abbey, this is from Elizabeth Vies. In her essay, she wrote about Northanger as a parody of the 18th century Gothic romance, but also as a precursor to this idea of like the lady detective or lady sleuth genre of literature, which continues to develop, even now into our contemporary times. So she says, Gothic parodies lay the foundation for later female-centric mystery literature. The Gothic novel has taught Catherine to think that women have lives full of thrilling particulars and momentous turning points. In creating Catherine Morland, Austen creates a new kind of female protagonist for Gothic and mystery literature. She splits apart the dual function that Ellen Moores has identified as defining the Gothic heroine, that of persecuted victim and courageous heroine. Catherine does not see herself as a Gothic victim. She sees Mrs. Tilney as one. Setting the stage for later fictional sleuths, Catherine positions herself as the courageous heroine, trying to avenge wrongs against and alleviate the suffering of the persecuted. So getting into Northanger Abbey as a parody. So specifically, it targets Anne Radcliffe's Mysteries of Udolpho, of course, but there are other Gothic works that are referenced in there as well. And most of the comedy comes from the expectation versus reality in Catherine's experience of Northanger Abbey. So we have Catherine expecting it to be this very spooky, old, haunted castle. She's expecting to discover some dark secrets, maybe uncover a murder that happened. But what she actually uncovers is a laundry list in a very ordinary closet in an ordinary bedroom. So it's that dissonance between what she's expecting and what actually happens that we find a lot of a comedy. As I mentioned, Northanger is a precursor to the lady sleuth genre, which ties into the mid-century, mid-20th century Gothic romance wave. That's the like women running from houses, Gothic romances of like the 50s and 60s, which this cover of Northanger Abbey was released in 1965. So it's very much trying to fit into that tradition. But then we also have the 20th century Gothic romance eventually evolving into the 21st century contemporary domestic thriller.
And just some notes here on what makes a 21st century domestic thriller feel specific and feel like its own category. So the title includes woman, girl, or a conventional female name. The point of view is of a middle class, often white woman who is experiencing a disruption of her day-to-day life, either a rocky divorce or a challenging life event. And this lead character may be written with anxiety or depression and then have society judge them for it. So there's a place of judgment against the point of view character. And then that judgment becomes the reason that the point of view character is not believed when they do, in fact, witness a murder. And then the story will follow the main character as she tries to convince the world of what she sees or what she has seen. There is no better example of a parody of this specific type of storytelling than The Woman in the House Across the Street from the Girl in the Window. The title lets you know exactly what it is with woman and girl present. The title follows those naming conventions. The elements of contemporary 21st century domestic thriller are explored as our lead character does experience depression and anxiety. And then she does also believe that she has witnessed a murder, as you can even see from the poster. And then those elements explored are also tragicomedy, which will mirror works that we explore later today as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the elements of tragicomedy here, trigger warning for some loss here, but we learn that Anna has lost her daughter. Her marriage has fallen apart, and she has been ostracized from the neighborhood and the school community. We join with Anna, and it is through her eyes that we witness the ludicrous and toxic PTA moms. So the PTA moms provide that element of judgment of Anna as a whole and disbelief when she tries to explain what she has seen. And I think really notable here as well is that Kristen Bell's performance as Anna offers a really tender and loving look at what depression feels like, while also exploring high comedy with it. So it feels very much like Kristen Bell understands how depression might feel.
Mm-hmm. And yet still there's comedy in that.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's the tragic comedy.
Yeah.
They're going to move on to satire. And, you know, satire and parody have a lot in common, but they are kind of two distinct elements. And, you know, I think Jane Austen is pretty well known as a satirist. And so we thought that, you know, we are lovingly drawn to the satirical characterizations of Emma Woodhouse and Kendall Roy from Succession. They're both clearly girl bosses who like drinking things out of tiny cups. And we're going to explore this a little more. So with Emma as a satire, so I think that there is like some discussion about whether or not Emma is intended to be read as a satire. But for our purposes, we are reading it as satire. So from the beginning, that very first description that we get of Emma as handsome, clever, and rich. So that is a description that Emma, like that is how she sees herself. And that's also the image that she is trying to project to the people around her. She wants others to see her as handsome, clever, and rich. She's rich, of course, so she is also pretty entitled. She does harm to people through her entitlement, and she never really has to take accountability or make amends for that harm. And yet she ends up getting everything she wants within the narrative. And it's interesting that Mr. Knightley kind of complains about the same thing about Frank Churchill, about how, Frank has done all of this harm to other people and ends up getting exactly what he wants. And everyone is, I think Mr. Knightley says, like, everyone is happy to forgive him. Like, he doesn't have to face any real consequences. So that's very, very interesting. Like I was saying this yesterday to somebody. I was like, Frank Churchill is literally the male Emma Woodhouse. Like, they're two sides of the same coin. But Emma's treatment of Harriet and Miss Bates in particular really illustrate how she sees herself as superior. And then I think what really makes this, what makes the argument for Emma being read as satire is that the class hierarchy is maintained by the narrative despite different messaging being suggested. So, like, for example, we have Emma suggesting that Harriet could marry above her social class. And like, Emma is framed as like being incorrect for that. And in the end, everyone who gets married marries someone of their own social class. And the narrative frames this as correct and like the natural order of things. And so I think if we're reading it as satire, we can kind of take that message kind of with a grain of salt. And it gives it a little bit more nuance in that way. I love this quote, this very famous quote that Jane Austen reportedly said to her family members about Emma, where she said, "I'm going to take a heroine whom no one but myself will much like." And so I feel like that could kind of be a little piece of evidence for reading Emma as satire, because it's as if she's kind of acknowledging that this is a heroine who it has all of these anti-hero qualities. Maybe we should not take this at face value. I don't know. You guys, let me know if you think Emma's satire.
And then we didn't find that there was any better lead in to our conversation about Succession than this quote from Jesse Armstrong, the showrunner for Succession, in an interview with NPR. It's not that I don't think he's speaking of the Roy family and the characters. It's not that I don't think people are capable of change or growth. I guess I would say they happen rarely, slowly, and not necessarily all in one direction. And that you're just as likely to devolve as evolve as a person, unfortunately. And that just feels like a theme that is explored throughout Succession with the Roy siblings.
Yes.
Most notably with Kendall. So Succession as satire of the rich. For those who are new to the show or haven't seen it, Succession tells the story of the wealthy Roy family as their patriarch starts to fall ill and they start to figure out who will be his successor. We watch the siblings jockey for position as successor. And as we meet the Roy siblings, specifically our good pal Kendall here, he shows us time and time again just how incompetent at business he really is.
Which I think we see with, like, maybe not Emma's incompetence, but like she's not as like savvy about like human relationships as she likes to pretend she is, because she completely misses like social cues and people's kind of unspoken like I think that's
Yeah, I think Emma
she's clueless.
Exactly. Emma and Kendall would both deem themselves expert, and they
Right.
kind
And
of
they
prove
clearly are
themselves
not.
not
Yeah.
really. With Kendall Roy, each time he takes an action, it is ill-fated, all of them. And each time he has this confident smirk to the camera as if he's thinking, are you all ready to see some real talent at business here? Because get ready, because you're about to see it. And then he fails time and time again. Yep. But much like Emma as well, he's never in any real danger of losing it all. Even as we find that he will not be the successor. He is never in any sort of trouble at all. And even though the Roy siblings don't necessarily get what they want, they're all going to be just fine.
They're going to be fine. Yeah. And so will Mr. Darcy. Yeah.
So will Mr. Darcy. Little Easter egg there.
Yeah. And the Anne Elliot that could have been with Shiv. Still bitter.
Shiv.
This is really, what was the purpose of this slide?
It's the best work you've ever done,
It's
Rhonda,
the best work I've ever done. So like I was saying with Emma, like handsome, clever, and rich is the image she wants to project. And I think the same is true of Kendall. Like he wants to walk into a room and have people be like, oh, he's so handsome, clever, and rich, right? Like,
yeah,
that's his goal. He's the eldest boy. I love that so much. And I also love this quote from Emma. I always deserve the best treatment because I never put up with any other. It just speaks to her, like it's kind of a cheeky thing, but it also just really speaks to her entitlement because she 100% means that genuinely. And it also, this line also reads as very Shiv to me.
Yeah.
The
eldest, I think, of the Roy siblings.
No, Connor's the oldest.
I forget Connor's one of them.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So we're going to continue with our satire discussion. I feel like Lady Susan is really an underrated Austen work. We should be talking about it more. And, Kate Beckinsale just plays her to such perfection in Love and Friendship. And I think that there really is no better modern parallel for the Lady Susan character than Chloe in Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23. Look at this.
Just a special shout out to Rhonda for finding these two photos. Come on.
How can you not see this? So to talk about Lady Susan, so of course, Lady Susan I see her as kind of like an exaggerated version of Emma Woodhouse, but then she also has like some Mary Crawford from Mansfield Park thrown in for good measure. So much like Emma, she is entitled and manipulative and remains completely unrepentant. But unlike Emma, Lady Susan is kind of always like on the verge of poverty. And so, because after her husband passed away, she like loses a lot of the fortune that she was relying on for her living. And so like reading it through the lens of satire, we can kind of see her manipulative actions as a means of survival. But it's kind of taken to extremes. And that's actually where a lot of the comedy comes from with Lady Susan, is that she's taking these very extreme actions. She's like, like doing these like contortionist manipulations, to people that she knows, to try to just, like keep clawing her way up. But like she's, totally like doesn't see like what's wrong with what she's doing. She's like, what? Like, whatever. Like they deserve it, or I'm only doing it because I need somewhere to stay. I need to eat, right? I loved this quote from Paula Byrne in The Genius of Jane Austen. She says, she's specifically talking about Kate Beckinsale's portrayal of Lady Susan. She says she's allowed both to play the game and win the game. The game is the marriage market. She is better than all the men around her because she is more intelligent and resourceful. She is self-aware, selfish, and not self-deluded. She wreaks havoc on those around her and is gloriously unrepentant. I love this. She is a magnificent monster who imposes her will on the world. And this to me sounds a lot like
our good pal Chloe,
like Chloe
from Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23. I think that Chloe would describe herself as doing what she does for survival. However, it's just not the case. She could,
or doing it because like people deserve it, like
right. She's very much, I know better than everyone else, and here's what I need to do. And she's not necessarily rich, but she acts like it. She's put on this demeanor of the rich, spoiled socialite. And she finds ways to use people. I think the entire show begins as we learn that she will ask potential roommates, to pay up front as they move in with her, and then she will just engage in horrific action to get them to move out, and then of course does not give them the money back. One of my favorite things about the performance here is that her actions are almost slapstick in their delivery, which feels like even her movement is out of touch with reality, which I think is just really nice matching of the inner working of a character on outward. However, her actions do remove her from meaningful connection. And that's where it reminds me of some of the other things we've talked about with Lady Susan and even Emma, that throughout her journey, material wealth is proven far less important than human relationship, because she misses out on it.
And we have a clip here. Oh, can everyone hear? Do I need to share the sound again?
Freak them out.
I can hear now.
Okay.
Gobble, gobble. Is your wife home? Because I'm wearing her t-shirt right now.
Wait, what?
Hey, Harold, did you see the parade? Get tested.
All right, I'll go ahead and play the clip again because I think we might have missed part of the audio. Sorry.
Thanksgiving, Chloe. Do you want me to make you my traditional turkey?
This is Chloe's Thanksgiving tradition. She calls all of her married lovers while they're home with their families to freak them out.
Gobble, gobble. Is your wife home? Because I'm wearing her t-shirt right now.
Wait, what?
Hey, Harold, did you see the parade? Get tested.
And if it did break up, she's calling the cheating husbands and basically letting the wives know what's been going on. So holding that moral superiority there.
Right. Yeah. Which is so, like, I feel like this little scene especially is such a Lady Susan move, because she's like, Lady Susan and Chloe, both of them, like, they see what they're doing. Like, they don't see themselves as like morally in the wrong. They see other people that they're doing this to, as which, I mean, in this case, yeah, like, these husbands are cheating on their wives. Yes, they do deserve to be called out. Like, yeah.
And I saw a comment here that Don't Trust the Bee is underrated, and we
really
agree
is
wholeheartedly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please go watch it. It's so weird because, like, it was originally aired, like, the episodes aired out of order, so it's really hard to like watch it in the right order, but yeah, it's worth it. Anyway, we're gonna move on. Inversion and establishment of superiority. These two elements, we often find them in tandem in comedy. And when we were thinking about these elements, I think Sense and Sensibility immediately comes to mind for me. And then, a work that we see a lot of really striking parallels with Sense and Sensibility is Schitt's Creek. In both of them, we have families that through some chain of events end up losing their fortunes and their positions in society and end up having to move to small towns and learn how to live a simpler life. And then, of course, like the stories diverge from there, but, you know, it's a parallel premise, right?
Yeah.
So just a couple quick definitions for these two. So inversion is just a reversal of expectations in terms of character roles or plot events or lines of dialogue. And it's the reversal that we get the comedy from. And then establishment of superiority, that's pretty clear, but it's just establishing intellectual or moral hierarchy, or sometimes both, to allow the audience to feel superior, or sometimes to allow the audience to identify with a character that feels superior to another character. So it could be either one of those. And Sense and Sensibility is really set up really well for a character inversion, because you have Eleanor as sense, Marianne as sensibility. They're perfect opposites. And as a comedic device, this is really the best setup for inversion, because you have two characters in this case, or, you know, in other cases, it could be like two places or two ideas that are opposing, and they're established within those set characters or points of view through repeated instances, but then you have one instance where they reverse. And so we have Eleanor as sense, we have Marianne as sensibility. And with Marianne, I love Marianne so much. I am a Marianne, so I feel like I have the right to like drag her a little bit. So Marianne is read as a satirization of the sentimental novel heroine. So her sensibility is contrasted with Eleanor's sense and logic, but it's also shown to be like a little ridiculous and over the top at times, right? Like she's an emo teenager. She cries in the rain. Yeah, she'd probably be on Tumblr if she were around today. So it's another great quote from Paula Byrne, where she says, Eleanor's dry responses to Marianne's impassioned outbursts often, though not always, prick the bubble of her excessive sensibility. Eleanor's internal suffering is keenly dramatized, while Marianne's is often satirized, largely because it is of her own creation. And I think Emma Thompson's adaptation of Sense and Sensibility shows this really well. We have several scenes where Marianne is sobbing inconsolably. She's letting out emotions. And we see Eleanor, in contrast, being very calm and collected, and kind of being the one who tries to temper Marianne's emotional outbursts. Until we get to this scene.
Then you are not married.
No.
So the reason why this scene is funny to us is because of inversion. It's been established that Marianne is the one who normally has these kinds of outbursts, and Eleanor is the one who remains calm. But we have that switched here. Eleanor is letting out all this emotion that she's pent up. And then we also see in this scene that Marianne is the one who stays very calm and knows exactly what to do, where she kind of like makes eye contact with her mom, and she's like, we gotta give them some space here.
Yeah.
So, and you know, I do acknowledge that this particular instance of inversion is probably more accurately credited to Emma Thompson than to Jane Austen, because Emma Thompson made this choice. But you know, Jane Austen set up this scenario for inversion, so we're still going to say that it counts. You can fight me if you disagree. Okay.
Another way that we see inversion is in the specific line writing of like a specific joke within a text. And this is all over Schitt's Creek. The Levies write this way often. And it's seen, so inversion may also refer to a joke in which a statement is made and then the character's meaning reverses the line. So Mr. David Rose here with I could not be more at one with nature. I do Coachella every year. With our good friend Moira Rose saying, what you did was impulsive, capricious, and melodramatic, but it was also wrong. They're such a special family.
They are great.
Stevie Budd with I'm incapable of faking sincerity. And Miss Moira Rose again, great face she's making here too. When she says this wine is awful, get me another glass.
Yes.
And this kind of inversion is really seen throughout the entire series.
Mm-hmm. I especially love I'm incapable of faking sincerity, because that reminds me of Catherine's line in Northanger Abbey when she says, I cannot speak well enough to be unintelligible. Like, I feel like there's such a similarity. I'm incapable of faking sincerity. That is like such a Jane Austen line. That's brilliant. I love that. And then getting into our establishment of superiority in Sense and Sensibility. So establishment of superiority is something that Jane Austen does quite a lot in all of her works, actually. All of her novels have characters that are meant to be ridiculous, that are meant to be a little over the top and give the reader a little bit of a sense of superiority. And often, usually it's like kind of an intellectual superiority, but there is sometimes like some moral superiority in there as well. So like we have like the Steele sisters, which I would say there's elements of both moral and intellectual hierarchy there, especially with Anne. Although Lucy's kind of a mastermind. I don't know if there's intellectual superiority there. But then also like with Fanny Dashwood, there's a little bit of both. Moral and intellectual. Sir John and Mrs. Jennings, I would say it's really more intellectual for them. They're pretty much good people, right? Yeah. But then we have John Willoughby, who you just want to punch in the face. And, there's not direct comedy in wanting to punch him in the face. But, we can make memes about him and laugh about him.
Yeah.
Like,
and we should.
Yes. No thanks to John Willoughby.
And in Schitt's Creek, the establishment of superiority is pretty constant, and there are 3 layers to it. But I wanted to start off with just some photos here. So the first one, which does it really well, I think, is all 4 of the Roses in their like highest, best dressed moments next to the Rosebud Motel by the side of the road. Just like they will not give up. And their fashion, Alexis looks pretty great here, but Moira's outfit is absurd too. So and that's kind of her character as well, as to be a little bit absurd.
It's
there.
Chrome.
It's very much chrome. It feels like the Capri Sun Silver Surfer.
Oh,
anyway, next here we have David Rose standing next to a mannequin at the blouse barn and just being really even judgmental in his stance there of what this mannequin is wearing. Up top we have Jocelyn Schitt and Moira Rose, and both women are firm and founded in who they are, and they could not be more different. And that's part of what plays into that establishment of superiority a little later. And we cannot talk about the Roses without this photo of David in like $1,000 hooded sweatshirt with like a mohawk on it while holding just a horrible piece of farm equipment in a random field, and he's just not having it. We just can't talk about them without that. And so the establishment of
I love
superiority,
this photo of Moira too. Oh my gosh.
I know, and this is her audition attire. This is when she goes to audition for work. So this is like her proudest moment. But so the establishment of superiority here is threefold. So we as the audience feel superior to the Roses instantly, as this is established as their lavish mansion is torn to pieces by debt collectors, and their fortune is literally taken from their hands as they scream about how much they need their material goods. And they must move to Schitt's Creek, which, by the way, they own, which was a gag gift for David that they almost forget that they have. And then as they move there, so we have established that we, the audience, are superior morally to the Roses. And then as they move to Schitt's Creek, the townspeople and the Rose family attempt to establish superiority with one another. So as Jocelyn shops at the Blouse Barn and loves the clothing there, but David balks at their clothing, the Roses assume that they know more and are superior. In turn, as the Roses work through bankruptcy, wear loud and dramatic haute couture, and tell stories from their former lives, the townsfolk roll their eyes and assume superiority over them. So kind of juxtaposing for who is actually superior.
And then our final expression that we are going to discuss here. So we have incongruity and tragicomedy, which also oftentimes tend to go hand in hand. And the two works that we are using to exemplify these are Persuasion and Fleabag. And it's not just because the 2022 Persuasion is said to have Fleabagified Persuasion. That is like, maybe that's part of it. But I think that there really is kind of a kinship between the text of Persuasion and Fleabag in the elements of incongruity and tragicomedy that we find in both. And again, just with some definitions, incongruity is when something is out of place or absurd in relation to its surroundings. And tragicomedy is the blending of elements of both tragedy and comedy. So you can kind of see how those two things might kind of mesh together, where you have something comedic springing up in the midst of tragedy that's incongruous. And so it makes us laugh even though we're crying. It's like, that's the whole idea there. So in Persuasion, I thought it was important to establish that Persuasion is actually comedy. I've heard a lot of discussion of like the opinion that like Persuasion is not a comedy, but I think it actually is. And in fact, in the words of Sean Dempsey, it is in Persuasion that we find the most mature version of Austen's comic vision. And, gotta throw this Mary Musgrove gif in here. Always love dunking on Mary Musgrove. So in Persuasion, we often see a link between the ridiculous or comedic and the tragic. So Sir Walter is a great example. He is a ridiculous character. He's kind of a classic Austen comedic side character in many ways. But at the same time, he also has connections to the biggest tragedies in Anne's life, and even at times has kind of caused or facilitated tragedy in Anne's life. Persuasion has the structure of a romantic comedy, much like Austen's other works, but then the comedy is shaded with some darker and more melancholy elements. And so because of this kind of juxtaposition, Austen is really leaving it up to the reader to find the humor in the characters and in the dialogue and situations. And that's really because of that blending of tragedy and comedy. But the comedy is most definitely present in Persuasion. And with Anne herself as the protagonist, and not always, but often as the point of view character, Anne is hiding her true self from most of the other characters. And in my interpretation, she's also she's holding back a lot of herself from the narrative itself. So the narrative is framing her in a certain way, but that's not truly who Anne is. And so she's pushing against these restrictions. And she's also very self-deprecating. Her observations of the other characters are very sharp and very witty. She, is kind of like, she's laughing through like all of the pain that she's experiencing. But like no one can see that, but her outlook is very like darkly comedic. Which, is very similar to our lovely Fleabag.
Yeah. And, anytime I talk about Fleabag, I do want to offer a trigger warning. We are going to talk about loss of a loved one and get into that as well. So if that does not feel comfy, take care of yourself. But Phoebe Waller-Bridge's Fleabag is, at its core, a redemption arc. Fleabag walks through life picking up the pieces of a tragedy that she feels very responsible for. And the comedy and tragedy of this piece are often internally linked. She is taking hilarious action, but at its core, those actions are self-destructive. We laugh as we cringe. And because she's so gosh darn charming. And so as we come to understand the tragic elements of the plot, as we get to know her more, as we watch more of the show, the quality of our overall comedic experience changes there.
Right.
The show. We'll start with a bit of levity, incongruity. So this friend here, Bus Rodent meets Fleabag on her way home from work. They lock eyes in what would regularly be a meet cute, because Fleabag does also follow the romantic comedy beats in kind of incongruous ways, you could say. So they lock eyes in a meet cute while Bus Rodent he's reading the paper, only to be exposed to the visual gag that his dashingly handsome looks also include some exaggerated bad teeth. And this in itself I would be a little bit bothered if it was just about his physical presence, but his demeanor follows suit.
Right.
He's a lot, we can say.
He's odious.
He's odious.
He's a bit of a Mr. Collins.
Yeah, absolutely. But she proceeds to date him as she winks to the camera about how, odious he is, about how ridiculous his actions are. And then, so just following those classic romantic comedy beats, in a classic romantic comedy, Fleabag would meet a conventionally handsome and charismatic and hopefully likable stranger, and they would turn out to be soulmates, when in actuality, she handpicks Mr. Wrong and proceeds with the steps of a romantic, very, very intentionally. As she does this, she breaks the fourth wall and she lets us in on the joke. However, this pattern also provides the tragicomedy of the piece.
Yeah. We don't have, there you go. There's one more.
There's one more. Her partners make us laugh as we cringe. However, there is that underlying tragedy as Fleabag works through what has happened, even in the title and her title that she's given herself, Fleabag. She cannot forgive herself and turns to self-deprecation. she denies that human connection until the very last moment of the show when she tells the screen, it's okay, you can leave me. And then she begins to heal.
Yeah. It's so beautiful.
It really is.
Now I got to rewatch Fleabag.
I'm always
rewatching Fleabag. Yes, so we don't have a conclusion slide. We're excited. So for these are all the works that we cited, of course, and we'll make the like a viewable link to the slides available in the description of the video once it's uploaded. So feel free to peruse through this if you would like to. But just before we wrap up, just wanted to talk a little bit about Pop DNA, our podcast. So we, as I said at the beginning, we typically in our regular format, we take a current popular media work, usually a movie or TV show, and we break down the cultural and literary and historical influences that we find within it. And we are on all the major podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I guess some people use Google Play. I don't know. Well, I don't know what the kids are doing these days. And then our most recent episode, we actually just wrapped up our like kind of summer mini series, summer camp. So it was all about like campy movies. And the latest episode is about Jupiter Ascending and Attack of the Clones. It was a very fun discussion. You can go check that out. Our next episode.
So we traditionally do a birthday bonus mystery.
And Erin's birthday is coming up.
It's on its way. And so we'll do a mystery episode that may or may not have to do with one of the works we talked about today.
We'll see.
We'll just see. And then for our next deep dive, next season starts in September with Abbott Elementary, which we just
very
love.
excited. And I didn't put it on here, but Pop DNA does have an Instagram that you can go follow. Sometimes we post like memes there. You never know. It's very irregular though, so don't expect too much. If you can also follow Erin on Instagram. She's Mother of Grumble.
And if you're here, you likely know of Rhonda's prowess in the TikTok sphere. Rhonda talks about books, is just a source of joy specific to Jane Austen and is delightful. Follow her there. Yeah. And
then we do have, I know we were trying to keep this under an hour, but if you want, if anybody has some questions, we have a couple minutes we could answer.
Yeah.
If anyone has questions, if you have comments, anything you wanted to add to any of our points. I like this. How have I rewatched this show so many times and not known he was called Bus Rodent?
I didn't. Yeah, I had to look it up too. I wasn't sure.
Yeah. Oh, and this one says, they kind of give Elliot family vibes. I think that's talking to the Rose family. Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Love that. Yeah, I know there's a little bit of a delay, so it might take a second if anyone has questions for them to pop up. So we'll wait just a second before we wrap it up. Oh, Virtual JaneCon says, thank you so much. You're welcome, Virtual JaneCon.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we loved this.
Thank you, Virtual JaneCon.
We had so much fun.
Yes, we had so much fun putting this together. Please go to Virtual JaneCon's channel if you haven't already. They have a playlist of everything there. Follow them on socials. Yeah. Oh, what's this? For 21st century domestic thrillers, I thought of Gothica.
Sure.
Yeah, with Halle Berry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I haven't seen that in so long.
I know. I haven't seen it in a long time. And, Jane Austen First Draft, imagining Alexis saying Eleanor, ew. I love that.
Yes.
That's
yes,
amazing.
Because we were talking about that earlier because we were like, Alexis
Eleanor.
And David is Eleanor. So that's absolutely like,
ew, Eleanor. Ouch, Eleanor.
Can you imagine Marianne saying that?
Oh, so good.
So perfect. Oh, here's a good question. if you could rewrite any of Austen's works with different themes,
Ooh.
i.e. Emma as more tragic comedy, which work and what themes? Oh, I feel like that's such a good, deep question.
Yeah.
Oh man. Emma as a tragic comedy. I think it would probably, I think maybe like the 2009 Emma miniseries does a little bit of tragic comedy because it kind of explores Emma and Frank Churchill and Jane Fairfax's kind of early backstories. Like as children, they all lost parents, and it explores kind of that connection. So that might be kind of like it does not continue that throughout the rest of the miniseries, but there is kind of a bit of a tragicomic element there. Yeah, that's a great question though.
That is a great question.
I'm going to be thinking about that. Oh, this is great. This peeled back even more layers on Austen for me and gave me some more ideas and themes to reflect on. Good. That's what we were trying for.
Awesome.
Excellent. All right. Well, we are right at an hour now. So
Yeah.
thank you so much, everyone, for
Thank you,
joining
everyone.
us.
Happy virtual JaneCon.
Happy virtual JaneCon. Please check out the rest of the programs. They look pretty fun.
And be sure to treat yourself to a boiled potato.
Yes, please do. Always boiled potatoes. All right. Goodbye, friends.
Bye, friends.